figured I would jump in here to the deep end of the pool and do hopefully a very quick pace, but very deep dive into data safety in the hospital settings. We're really going to be talking about personal health information in the hospital or medical professionals professions, where information is shared. And today, that is one of the biggest issues and opportunities that are out there. I'm of that age where I'm talking to my doctor once every 6 months for sure. And we're doing it through telehealth, right? And it's interesting, all the different paradigms that we've gone through just in the past 8 months. I mean, it's been revolutionary and disruptive and a super accelerated, almost mutant type of mutating every day type of process. So, but on the back end, the hospital markets, the medical professions, they've been dealing with this for years. And the reason they were able to actually just get in there and do it was because they've really been poised and ready to do this. The big term is I'm going to use my air quotes, the interoperability. I first heard that term 12 years ago. So getting that interoperability between systems is critical. It has to work, but more importantly, or as importantly, it has to be managed and validated. If we just let every hospital, every vendor, there are a lot of big guys out there. Epic comes to mind. Medidata comes to mind. They will all, they would just do whatever they wanted. So there's times when we're happy that we have regulatory authorities in our governments providing oversight, so that our multi-billion dollar corporations just don't do whatever they want, which is typically to make money. So here in the United States, our regulatory authorities have crafted HIPAA, which I'm sure we all know, because if you go to the doctor, at least on your first visit, you have to sign a HIPAA consent form. And I'm going to compare that to, after we go through it, to a GDPR, which is the European version of HIPAA. Traditionally, the Europeans are much more stringent about protecting people's privacy. I mean, if you remember, the first thing I think we all heard, what was it, Adam, 10 years ago, when Microsoft, embedded Internet Explorer, and they went after Microsoft for antitrust, right? Because, what was the other browser?
Well, Firefox was the competing.
Firefox, right? They couldn't compete because they weren't embedded. So why would you use Firefox?
If you're going back in time, it would be Netscape.
Netscape, that was it, right? Very good, Netscape. And by the way, if I don't have answers, I'm sure between all of us, we're going to have the right answers. And if we don't have them, we'll make them up. But basically, I'll do a comparison on those. So I've been doing this probably for 30 years. I built systems back in the 90s for pharmaceutical industries. I'll mention one in particular that I've done a lot of work with every decade, Pfizer, out of Groton. And we all know Pfizer's in the news now because of COVID. I just want to say the reason that these guys are bringing a vaccine to market is because they've been working on this for years. COVID is the name, for the coronavirus, which is just another virus. So these guys have been prepping for these types of viruses. And so, typically a phase 1, 2, and 3 studies, those take 5 years. Well, it's not that we've gone through phase 1 and 2 and 3 studies in 8 months. They've done phase 1 and 2 studies, which is safety and small populations. They've done those already years ago. So these big studies that they're doing, Moderna or Pfizer, those studies are, they've been poised to do those. The fact that they were able to get the number of patients they needed in, no thanks to COVID, but thanks to COVID, they were able to find them. So,
Oh, we'll see.
but having good drugs, things that aren't counterfeit. I think we all remember the compound fiasco, the compounding company here in Massachusetts that had a very bad compound that went out that was horrific. I think some people finally went to jail for that. So
Yeah, New England
building those
compounding
systems
center.
that meet the regulations can be challenging and exciting and very, very scary. But exciting. Sometimes scary, like a roller coaster, is exciting as well. So today, and I'm going to stop doing a lot of anecdotes because the presentation will have most of this information. We're going to have a lightning review of the regulations where they differ and examine a real life use case in the hospital market. I have to say that, and I'm going to show you in a moment, that I'm not so sure how lightning fast it's going to be because there's a lot of information, and I'm going to go through it fast, but it's like a lightning bolt that's hanging out there for 5 or 10 or 15 minutes. So we'll try to get through it really quickly. If you've heard it, if you've been in the medical pharmaceutical industry, you might want to get a cup of coffee if you know it all already, and that's great. For those of you, this is what's going on behind the scenes in the development of the drugs. And then we'll talk about HIPAA under COVID, telehealth, and social media. Most of us are either IT consultant types. We're either in IT, we're IT consultants. I'll call us ITCs. We're working for a company that's maybe providing services. You might be providing consulting to some of these. If you're even doing personal consulting, you could be doing consulting to a doctor who needs help with a commuter at home. That doctor hopefully is using the proper precautions on their computers at home. And you as an IT consultant can certainly help them with that. There's a huge opportunity to help the healthcare professionals at home bolster their own security and work smart. We'll talk about what you need to do as a IT consultant to maintain HIPAA compliance. And then we'll look at building a HIPAA compliant texting solution and using a case study for texting. This is my bio again. I said it a little earlier. I have my own consulting company. I'm the CEO, the chairman of the board. But in the technology world, I think of myself as a CTO. Again, providing solutions to the biotech medical industries for over 30 years. I've worked recently for about 5-6 years for a company doing data analytics, pulling data in and visualizing that data. I'm also a principal in Vector Wellness, which is a Hingham-based health and wellness company, which is where I'm delivering these solutions today. And this is actually all a very, I took this out of an old bio from an old stodgy technology company. So, and these are all the things I've done over the years. So the HIPAA, we're going to do this deep dive, and I'm going to do it as quickly as I can, and hopefully my voice will knock it out. It's what is that? 1996, 2006 to 2016. It's 24 years old, and this is the famous phrase that if you've ever seen anybody talk about HIPAA, this is the paragraph that they put up there. And I'm just going to jump to it. You guys can read it. I want to note that if you see italics in any of my slides or bold things, bold and italics are my own anecdotes and commentary on things. So, the other purposes, that we see there, it's really the other purpose is privacy, right? But in that paragraph, you don't see the word privacy. Some people think, oh, maybe the P was privacy. It's not, it's portability. Portability is interoperability, being able to share information between Beth Israel Deaconess and Mass General. And the big issue is originally they wanted to combat waste and fraud, well, mostly waste, fraud, abuse in health insurance, right? The real driver for HIPAA was health insurance, to reduce the cost of health insurance. So, but the waste aspect was, if you go to Beth Israel Deaconess and you get an X-ray, and they say, look, we really need to send you over to an expert at Mass General. Guess what? Historically for the past 10 years, 20, 2-3 decades, you would get the same X-ray twice. You get the X-ray at Beth Israel, and then you get it at Mass General, and that's a huge waste. Why not build a pipe that they can use to share that information, to share that X-ray? Sure, some results, lab tests, if my blood pressure is 140 over 100, it's bad. That's a very small amount of text that could be shared easily, but an X-ray is huge. How do you build the pipes? And some of you guys, I think, said that you've been in the sort of, I think, either the data storage or sort of the back end architecture of building this type of infrastructure. Today, in this second decade we're going on to the third decade of the 21st century, our pipes are really big now. And so it makes the sharing really, really easy. But yet, again, we still think about HIPAA as privacy. So I'm going to just jump through this really quickly. We don't really need to look at the history too much, but there was in '96, it was they introduced the privacy of healthcare information. In 2002, there was the final version, and then everybody needed to be compliant by 2003. And then, there was 2007. They amended the rules to clarify non-discrimination provisions. 2009 was a banner year. They introduced the Health Information Technology for Economic and Clinical Health. I think they had the acronym HITECH, and then they backfilled what they wanted it to mean. But that really is the technology background for how do we share the information. And they made it part of the I don't want to say Obamacare, but this 2009 when this went into effect as part of the American Recovery and Reinvestment Act. Remember 2008, we thought that the market, and our lives were, our financial lives were over. They took advantage of the American Recovery Act, right, and Reinvestment Act, to build in this high tech, and they funneled a lot of money into that. So that was one of the things that they spent money on. They spent money on physical highways, and they spent money on technological highways. More recently, 2013, they introduced the GINA, the Genetic Information Non-Discrimination Act. We'll talk about that a little bit later. Basically says that you can't use genetic information against people. If somebody has a genetic predisposition, it can't be used against them. So HIPAA is complicated. Key components of the regulations are the privacy rule, the security rule, and the breach notification. I think there's a fourth in there. I have a Chrome set of tabs that we are going to jump to every now and then and look at. I thought there was a fourth one, but I can't remember what it was, and there probably isn't. So there's the privacy rule, the security rule, the breach notification rule. And feel free to Google as we go along. So the privacy rule basically restricts covered entities and business associates in how they use and disclose individuals' protected health information. PHI, I'm just going to say this up front, and I'm hopefully not going to say it. Anything that is basically in your medical record, from a technologist standpoint, just think of it as PHI, because one thing leads to the other. If you start pulling a thread on something, you said, well, that's not really PHI, but if that's connected to another piece of information, that's connected to another piece of information, that third piece of information could be personal health information. And, you've really got to be very protective and put layers of security around personal health information. Covered entities, I'll say now, are, the hospitals, the medical professions, the business associates, or anybody who's got a contract in providing services to those covered entities, to those hospitals. That goes from, Verizon providing, the pipes, or Epic providing software, or to the cleaning company that's coming in. Well, I guess they're not coming in and cleaning the office as much anymore, but those are who are coming in and cleaning the offices, right? They're, business associates, because they might have access to professional protected health information that's on paper on people's desks, which it shouldn't be. It should always be locked up. PHI versus PII. PHI, as we said, is the protected health information. We don't have to belabor this too much, but it's everything. From my perspective, it's anything that can be transmitted in any form: films, charts, health records such as electronic health records, electronic medical records, lab test results, soup to nuts, everything, including insurance information. Believe it or not, is also the HIPAA personal health information. They're all PHI. So again, if you're getting into this market or dealing with this, best bet is just think of everything as potentially HIPAA, as personal health information. And if any information is created, used, or disclosed by a HIPAA-covered entity in the course of providing the care to an individual or used in conjunction with payment for care, and that's the code word for insurance, is considered PHI and is subject to strict controls over its allowable uses and disclosures. I'm going to ask you if there's any questions after this one. PII is sort of the identifiable information, and I'm going to show you a list in a second of what could be PII. But again, this is where the thread happens, because PII, it's a social security number. It's a medical record number. It's, you go to the hospital, they put a wristband on you, and you've got a medical record number on you. Well, that medical record number, you look at it, it doesn't mean anything, but it's tied in a computer system to your name, right? And your address and your phone number and all of your charts. So there is connectivity, right? When it includes an identifier that links it to a specific patient, it's PII. So again, to me, it's a continuum. And proof of the pudding is, here's examples of PHI and PII. It's everything, right? Potentially everything. So, when you look at all this, you say, oh, this is all, when I fill out my form, when I go to the doctor, I mean, fine, but, to me, as a technologist, I would think, okay, maybe internet addresses, biometric, full face, this is what we think in the technology arena, but it's all your personal information. So, any of this can be examples of PII. So you've got to be very careful and just, again, I won't belabor it. Any questions so far? Martin?
Yes. So in the course of my computer consulting, I have a number of clients who are therapists.
Yep.
And I help them with, any range of computer issues, from, what's copy and paste and why should I care, up through email and printer issues, et cetera. Yep. Up until COVID, I would often work in person, but even pre-COVID, I would often also work remotely.
Right.
But either way, I'm either, with them on their computer screen or, remotely or in the room with them. And in the course of, bopping through the email or looking through folders, it is normal to trip over, what I would call, the mild side of this information. Here's an email from a patient. I don't necessarily pay attention to what the body of the email is, but I might be helping the client, clean out their email address book, or we might even click on this thing by accident on the way to going somewhere else. So, and most of my clients do not keep any clinical stuff on their computer. I mean, I'm no expert, but I can imagine session notes, insurance information, I might see a patient name, I might see.
They
I
keep
can
it
actually,
somewhere, but go ahead. Yeah, I'm sure you're getting to.
So my point is, I can't predict what I might see in a given session.
Right.
And I tend to generally reassure my clients that, I'm here to help you. I'm not here to snoop on your information. So even if I might see something, I don't retain it. So what should I be doing? Or my client and am I I forget the term there, business associate?
You're right. Yes, you're a business associate.
Okay, because I'm not involved, because you mentioned information disclosed during the providing of care or in conjunction with payment for care. And I'm technically neither. I'm, in piece of the string, maybe indirectly helping the client who is in fact your therapist.
Right. So what you would actually be doing, and I'll show you as an example, you could have a business associate agreement with them. There's two things you should do. Is one is you should, and I have this for you, is take an official HIPAA training class and get, a nice little certificate, and have a BAA, business associate agreement, handy and ready to work with them. If they've worked with other people and they've signed them, they'll know what you're talking about. And I have a sample of that, which, I could even share with you if you needed it. But you're protecting them. You're not culpable. They're the ones who are at risk. And they need to be, I would say that, it's another business, right? Or another aspect of the business is you could actually help them become more, let's say, HIPAA compliant or more secure. Seeing a contact book is in itself a violation because you're not linking it back, and you're not able to link it back.
I'm sorry, it is or is not?
Is not. Because
Okay.
you're not making, you can't, just from seeing the contact list, you can't make the connection back to the session notes for that
Even if I know that this Joe Smith is a patient.
They're a patient, but you haven't seen any of their data.
Right.
are you
Right.
looking,
So you've
can I
seen
ask
the
a
PI,
question?
you've seen the PII, but you haven't seen the PHI,
Okay.
right? Somebody had something to say?
I'm sorry, Kimberly?
Technical problems. Kimberly, did you want to ask the question?
Yeah, have you seen the email itself, or you've only seen the name?
It depends on what we're doing. I mean,
They-
but generally speaking, my clients are, I have one client who will even say, Martin, could you look away while I close this window?
Right, right.
Because if you're not looking at the email, you should be fine. You're just seeing a name. It could be anybody's name. As long as you're not looking at the last name, you're not looking at it,
Right.
you should be fine. Plus,
Right. However, that medical professional shouldn't be. They can say, hey, we're having an appointment on Tuesday.
yeah,
But it should not say, and we're going to talk about the fact that you're depressed,
Right.
and you're taking Zoloft. That should not
Right.
be in the email, right? So
no. I did learn in
Go ahead, Kimberly.
was it client confidential consideration of social media that there's supposed to be another website thing, or like a
system.
what is it, software
Yeah.
for that.
Right. That's what
And,
my company does, Vector Wellness. We have
we
have a
did that.
portal for healthcare professionals to store all that information.
Yep, because if something was said wrong, where we were supposed to report it.
Right.
On
and
that.
You'll see in my presentation later, when we send out text, it doesn't have any PHI in it.
Yep.
And when we send the email for the meeting, for the session, for the calendar reminder, there's no choice but to send that, to their email, but it has no personal health information in it.
Yeah, because we have a situation where we have to have it in our phones and stuff. So that's how come we had that.
Right. And if you're working with a regular, one of the big or even medium-sized doctor, medical professional organizations, be it Atrius Health or any of these, they all now have apps, right? And the app
Yep,
is
that's the app. Yep.
and the app is fine. Why? Because it's
I forgot the name
app
of it.
is
Yeah.
secure, right? And we'll talk about that in a little bit.
Yeah, because I'm actually a ethics and considerations training I took in 2017 from CCAR.
Yep.
So yeah, and I have a book on all this.
Yeah. So Martin, I think there's another consulting opportunity there for you. To help them get their act together. I'll tell you anecdotally. Whenever I start to deal with a new nurse or a new doctor or a new health coach, they always say, "Well, my understanding is that if the patient tells me I can send it, then it's okay."
So David,
David, I think you need to go take your HIPAA class again.
David, this actually is a really relevant question, I think, for a lot of us. I know our family therapist, his specialty is seeing couples. And so his whole system is set up to see, his telehealth system is set up to see just two people are in the same room.
Right.
So to see people who are in two different rooms, he doesn't have the technology. So he said, well, we could use Zoom, but you have to give me permission. Are you saying that a doctor can't ask for that permission and that we can't grant it under HIPAA?
They can ask for permission, and actually we have a slide on what kind of scenario are you allowed to communicate with people. So for instance, and it's very timely because I have a list of apps that you can't use versus apps you can use and why you can do that. So in Zoom, if you got a couple, and their information together, is coupled, so to speak, it's probably okay. But in a meeting like this, if there's a healthcare professional in this meeting and somebody said, I'm feeling depressed, they could not start talking to that person, start diagnosing them.
Why don't we continue? It sounds like you have a lot more for us. Why don't we
Yep. And we'll see an example of that because the regulators have dealt with that.
And don't always forget
Kimberly,
get
let him
everything
continue.
with a release form.
Kimberly, hold on a second. We'll get. I definitely want to hear what you have to say, but let's David continue.
Yep. And you guys are great because you're covering you're thinking ahead, and it's perfect. So yep. The second one is the security rule. The security rule requires covered entities, and this really should be capitalized. Covered entities let's go back. The covered entities are the medical professional organizations. It's up to them to implement administrative, technical, and physical safeguards to ensure that confidentiality, integrity, and availability of electronic PHI. So, it's on them. It's on the medical professionals. You'll see in a minute that we, the business associates, we have to, it's actually gotten more stringent for us as well. So we kind of have to think as if we're the hospital. So if there was, if you're a hospital organization and you want to implement and meet the guidelines, this is sort of a little project plan. It's a JPEG that was lifted off the internet from URAC. By the way, I do try to give attribution where needed, or where I took things from. But URAC is a .org, and they basically have developed some guidelines on how to do this. So, like, you have to have a security official designated. You have to have do a gap analysis on your security policies. You have to do a risk analysis, which is different than a gap analysis. Risk analysis is what would happen if we had a breach. What would happen if the information leaked out there, which is timely. I'm going to take a moment here. Hot off the press today at 5:43 p.m. I don't know if any of you saw this today. A firm that protects businesses and cities from cyber attacks just got hit by one. FireEye, I didn't even heard of them, but the cybersecurity firm FireEye came under attack today, a cyber attack by highly sophisticated actors, likely sponsored by a nation state. I mean, now they're going after the guards, who are guarding the chicken, the chicken coop, right? It's I don't think they've ever seen it. It'd be like saying, okay, they're going after Kaspersky, or they're going after any of the virus protection companies. And in fact, they accessed certain red team assessment tools that we use to test our customer security. Holy F. Is that crazy or what? I mean, so it's getting hairy out there. So these, the IT, the chief information officer, the chief security officer, this guy or this gal here, this security official designated, that's got to be a C-suite level person, a chief security officer. I host my computer equipment in Iowa at a ISP called LightEdge, and they're a massive company. They host it for the Fed and banks, and they're actually in that Subtropolis, which is an underground city that they built. Well, where all this is housed. You should look it up. Subtropolis. It's a really interesting underground. They built it into the limestone, and there's lots of companies underneath there. They got hit with power outages a few weeks ago. So and they weren't ready for it. Good thing that wasn't a security breach. It was a power breach. But this security has to be at the C-suite level. The chief security officer has to report to the CEO, and then you have to do all these other things. We all know we have backups, but what's our disaster recovery plan? What's our contingency plans if our disaster recovery plans don't work? What happens if what if you have 15, 20 employees? Do you have a plan in place for them to work offline? Well, the good news is we're all working offline now, right? So we've pretty much everybody's had to figure that out pretty quickly. But what do you do if you have a breach? How do you remediate that? How do you train everybody, not just the IT, but all the people? So Martin mentioned these the professionals who are he's helping. Well, they need training. And then you have to do it periodically. You have to constantly be walking the perimeter and making sure that everything's secure. If there's a breach under HIPAA, you have to notify the affected individuals. So if you have a breach, and that's why if you've seen these, there were breaches where they had to, if you had 50,000 lives under your care, you had to notify each one of them and the Secretary of the US DHHS, and the media, which that's the worst part of all, right? Because we just saw the media jump on this one, right? CNN, hot off the press. These guys had to. I don't think this is not a HIPAA violation, or a HIPAA, but this is a security violation, or a HIPAA. I'm sorry, security breach. So. They keep changing the rules. The latest set actually lowered the threshold for notification of affected individuals, which means that in more cases, you have to notify your affected individuals. And it's, they actually said if the individuals were exposed to significant risk of financial, reputational harm, and instead they took that out, and instead they said, it's required in all circumstances, except if the risk establishes that there's a low probability of the compromise of the PHI. So if they got your social security number, but they couldn't get to your health information, that's a low probability. And then there are exceptions to even that breach. So if it was unintentional and it was good faith, so Martin, this is actually your scenario. Unintentionally, with good faith, you happen to see PHI by a workforce member, right? You're a BA, you're a business associate, you happen to see it. You're probably not going to, if you're working for that company, doing work for that one individual, or maybe it's a small doctor office, it's a dentist's office, right? Dentists are covered by this. An OBGYN, with the, small concierge practice. If you saw that, you're probably okay, and so is your covered entity. Because it was unintentional, and it was probably by the business associate. If you didn't have the BAA, you would probably still be okay. Charisse, is that how you pronounce your name?
Yep.
You mentioned that
Yep.
it'd be office. I think you were mentioning when you said it'd be awesome if that was made widely known that that the trials were rushed. I agree with you. I think that they're just there needs to be more knowledge put out there. I mean, this is I'm patriotic and everything, and but I'm also, I'll just come out there and say I'm a liberal New Yorker, but I mean our country has done extraordinary things in its lifetime, and whether it's aerospace or Elon Musk building rocket ships, or our pharmaceutical industry, even though they gouge us with prices, they're second to none in developing drugs. So it's a love-hate relationship with them, but I've been on the inside. Frankly, what another thing people don't know is it costs $1 million a day. This was the number 10 years ago, $1 million a day to bring a drug to
I know,
market.
I'm on the inside now and I see it.
Right. I mean, it could take, 5 to 7 years. Yeah, that might be fast, to get a drug to market. Multiply that by $1 million a day. Certainly the $1 million is typically later on, but if they can get through a phase 1 study, get to a phase 2 study, it's massive. And the regulators are, if you've ever had a colonoscopy, it's 1,000 times worse than a colonoscopy, what the regulators will do to the pharmaceutical and biotech companies before they let a drug go to market. So, those they're I can't say, I even though when I want to say bad things about them, I can't.
Also, David,
yeah, and then Charisse said, the vendor abuses, no doubt. It's not, it's really not the pharmas, it's the vendors to the hospitals and to the pharmas. So, yep. And Steve, did you mention the FireEye? Oh, was that before? Because I brought that up. I had that. Yeah, so I see that too. So Charisse said hackers have been targeting the IT outsourcers. I guess and it seems to be, it's probably been happening and we didn't know about it, but now we know about it.
yeah, Cognizant got hacked back in June, July, and it took their entire enterprise network down, such that in order to file timesheets, they had to spin up a Microsoft Azure website so we could file our timesheets.
Yep.
Yeah.
Yeah, so I just wanted to, if my screen's still up, I mean, this is Subtropolis.
Oof.
It's awesome. I was planning to visit them. That's old limestone. All these columns of limestone, all the walls. I mean, look at that thing, huh?
And where it is located, David?
I think it's in Iowa. Created through mining of a 270 million-year-old limestone deposit. Close to Kansas City, Missouri.
Oh,
Because my ISP is in Kansas City and in Altoona, Iowa, and that's where. So this is actually Subtropolis is the disaster recovery site for my primary location. But it's, you know, it's just, I mean, there's many companies under there, not all healthcare. I mean, yeah, and there's companies in there providing services to other companies that are in there.
Yeah, it happened to my mother's job too. They got hacked, and it's a nursing home.
Yeah, yeah.
And oh my God, she's an LPN. She's the one of the nurses, and they had update file, loan files, and all these files. Their IT service, and she's like, she's so
Yep.
stressed out from it.
Yep, yep.
And
All right,
David, David,
go. Yes.
can you also talk a little bit about hackers? Oh, this is a couple years ago. Hackers breached the Swedish Medical Center in Los Angeles with ransomware. And because one, their security was weak. Two, they didn't have a backup. It cost them $20,000 to unlock their files.
I mean, what, you know.
So I guess in following up on that, Therese, David, are backups required in writing in HIPAA?
I believe they are. I think we can, and I think we'll see that. I think
I
there's.
just want to contrast this with our local data safety regulations in Massachusetts, which we've talked about here in this group, the 201 CMR 17 regulations. Through an oversight, backups aren't mentioned at all. So good for HIPAA for including.
Yeah, yeah. And no, and HIPAA actually was spawned off of the, you know, again, the pharmaceutical industry, the grandparent to all this is the 21 CFR Part 11, which is the Code of Federal Regulation for the pharmaceutical industry to validate systems. And that was, I mean, you know, that covered everything. And yeah, backups are critical, but you know, you have to secure your backups too. So
Well,
your backups could be
yeah.
penetrated. So
let's let David continue.
yep.
Yeah, okay.
I'll keep going. So the breach, there were updates to the requirements. You know, I think, did we do this already? Yeah, we did, right? Yep. Okay. So who must follow this law? Covered entities and business associates. So again, in my mind, I think of myself as I have to do everything the covered entity has to do, unless it costs me way too much money. And we'll see an instance of that. So there are three types of covered entities: healthcare providers, health plans, including insurers and other payers, and clearinghouses, billing services. You know, the hospital doesn't, you know, they outsource their billing because the billing, you know, you get the explanation of benefits that's got your information on there. The explanation of benefits is what you're using to, you know, tie to what you got billed. So they, you know, all of these guys have to be careful and covered. But we, and I'm, you know, unless if we're not a covered entity, then we're a business associate. And the reach of this is that covered entities have to obtain written confidentiality assurances from their business associates, which is through a BAA, a business associate agreement. And business associates are defined as individuals outside of the covered entity that receive, create, or have access to individually identifiable health information, you know, even inadvertently, right? And perform a service on behalf of them, Martin, right? Or fit within the list of service providers, outside legal, actuarial, accounting, consulting, that's everybody. Your management, accreditation, data aggregation, financial services. So to that end, let me give you a quick view of the BAA that I use. And it's, you know, it's in Times New Roman, so it looks legalese and, you know, legal. And, you know, so if anybody needed a copy of this, I'll go through it to make sure that my stuff isn't in there, but you would have to change it from, you know, my co to your co, your company name.
So
and
David?
Yes.
So what are the, you know, takeaways that one is promising in this business associate agreement? Because, for example, I have access to my clients' computers through LogMeIn, but I have an encrypted password database and LogMeIn has incredible, security too. So even if someone were to break into my office, they'd be hard pressed to break into the client's computer. And I don't take screenshots. I try to look away. I respect.
You're doing the right things. You're doing the right practices, right? So it's a matter of reasonable practices, and we'll see that the Department of Health and Human Services has sort of, especially today in COVID, where they know this is happening, where they know that you, Martin, are helping somebody, they've relaxed those rules a little bit.
Yeah, I've noticed that for telehealth, Zoom, for example, is permitted in a patient and therapist session, whereas normally it would not be HIPAA compliant unless the therapist, paid 10 times as much for the HIPAA version of Zoom.
Right. So it's all in this paragraph. These are all the regs, right? We can see them all. There's high tech. There's ARA. We didn't even mention that one. The privacy rule, PHI, and they acknowledge that each has obligations in its respective role, right? You each have obligations. So you're Martin. If I were a doctor, I would trust you, but we would probably still need to have an agreement. We intend to protect the privacy. Right? These are all the whereases, and it's to satisfy certain standards and requirements of the rules. Right? We then therefore enter into foregoing recitals and other good and valuable consideration. We enter into this agreement, which is a little limited on the use and disclosure. So they have to try not to disclose it to you if you don't need it. If they do, you have to have stated purposes as to why you need that information. So if you were a billing company, you would have to say, well, look, I need access to it because I need to generate the EOB, the explanation of benefits, right? So it's all in here. And again, this was, we put this together and then we had attorneys vet it. So, and it's, how long is it? How many pages? Access to books and records, accounting, amendment, of the PHI, mitigation procedures, termination. It's a contract, right? And it's, I don't know how many pages is that? 6 pages. But it's a contract. It's basically, if you were doing security for somebody, it's not it's the written version of the handshake because they trust you. But this is it. This is in writing. So if anybody needed a copy of this, I would be able to provide it to them. I do have to go through it again first.
Of course. Yeah, my client briefly said I should get a BAA from you, but neither one of us kind of followed up.
Well, exactly. And this is so if nothing else comes out of this meeting tonight, Martin, you get my, I'll get you my email address and you give me yours and I'll send it to you. Yeah.
Okay. Well, thank you. I appreciate it.
Yeah.
David?
Go ahead.
I think if I don't want to interrupt your talk, so we'll give you a bit of time later to ask a few more questions.
Yep.
When you could carry on and I'll ask.
Okay. Yep. Here we go. So, you again, just think of this as if you have to protect that information that you might get your hands on inadvertently. Because, and we're going to rush through the rest of this, because, and that's why this is short, business associates are now directly regulated by the law and are directly responsible for compliance with certain of its provisions, whatever. It's recent changes. So, they want us as business associates, to really be thinking about it. So let's talk about HIPAA and the compliance in the age of COVID, telehealth, and social media. So this is from the OCR, the Office of Civil Rights. That's like, if you heard me hesitating before, it's because I was trying to think of this office, the OCR. It's not optical character recognition. It's the office. They've basically saying because of, and this is as of March 17th, right, just when COVID happened, right, and hit, that for telehealth remote communications, it will enforce, OCR will enforce its discretion and waive potential penalties against healthcare providers that serve patients through everyday communication technologies. Okay, so FaceTime, TikTok, I don't know, let's see. They won't, it'll exercise its enforcement discretion and not impose penalties for the good faith uses and disclosures of protected health information. So if they inadvertently shared it with you, I'm not sure that's good faith use. It's an inadvertent disclosure, but it's not a good faith use and disclosure. So, there could be legalese in here that, I don't necessarily want to interpret, but that's the key there. It has to be good faith uses and disclosures. Inadvertent is probably not a good faith use or disclosure. So inadvertent is certainly not a good faith disclosure. So, but they're going to relax it now because they know that the healthcare professionals, for the most part, are doing the best they can. But I want you to understand, this is not a get out of jail free card, right? If you're, it doesn't mean that they can. It's at their discretion. I'll tell you, if a big major healthcare provider had a breach, I don't think that the OCR is going to be lenient with them. So, just reading this, it doesn't let you off the hook, especially if you know about it, right? If you know better, then, don't use this card. Avoid the need for this card. So I'm not going to reiterate it again. That's the good faith provisions. So what might constitute a bad faith provision? So using public facing, and this goes to somebody's question, maybe Adam earlier, public facing remote communication products such as TikTok, Facebook Live, Twitch, public chat rooms. I don't know, sounds like this Zoom meeting, right? Because they're designed to be open to the public or allow wide or indiscriminate access to the communication. Okay, so these guys, no good. What are good are non-public facing remote communications, like Apple FaceTime. Why? Because it's one-to-one, right? It's me and my doctor. Facebook Messenger, video chat, Google Hangouts. And I actually have a slide here in Google Hangouts. We'll just look at it for 30 seconds, but because Hangouts is changing. Everything's changing quickly. WhatsApp, Zoom. Zoom's okay if it's a one-on-one, right? Or a one-on-two, because you're counseling both those people. So again,
so David, you're saying that Zoom is an okay use for if I'm counseling with a therapist. So Zoom is a good media to use for that particular purpose?
It's allowed in a one-on-one, end-to-end, because these platforms employ end-to-end encryption, right? And when they say end-to-end, it's the end-to-end encryption. It's from the doctor to you, right? But it's also, I take it to mean that there's a one-on-one or a one-on-two use for it. But if we were using Zoom in this meeting, and again, my analogy before was, if I said, if I came back from the breakdown, I said, I'm just really depressed, and there was a doctor on there, that doctor better not start to diagnose me or provide me any health related information. They should say, see your practitioner, talk to your PCP.
Excuse me.
Call 911, right? But so yes, Zoom is okay in a one-on-one or a one-on-two scenario.
Excuse me, David.
Thank you.
Yeah.
I researched this in particular in an article I wrote about Zoom, and there's two parts to this. For the duration of the pandemic, the Department of Health and Human Services is permitting, and they have a short list, including Zoom. But post-pandemic, regular Zoom is not HIPAA compliant. There's a special version of Zoom that basically costs 10 times as much.
Right.
So it's intended for paid practice, it's not for an individual practice.
Right.
Where they have a business associate agreement, and they've gone to extra efforts, which I don't understand,
Right.
for the security and all that. So it's not that Zoom's okay, even
Right.
one-on-one with a therapist. It's Zoom's okay for the duration of the pandemic.
Right.
Post-pandemic, if your therapist does an ad hoc Zoom meeting with you, it's not okay.
You are 100% right.
And I have some therapist clients who have banded together in 10 or more groups to share the cost of the higher level of Zoom. So be careful about, it's okay now, but it's not okay later.
Right. Exactly. So earlier on, I mentioned that there's a whole nother set of regulations. And the reason I want to talk about the GDPR is I forgot even what it stands for, but it's the General Data Protection Regulation in Europe, because Europe, and there's two leaders in the world in terms of protecting citizens and private entities. One is Europe with their set of laws, and the other is California. Where California goes, the country tends to eventually catch up. So the GDPR is very interesting because they also provide rules, just like HIPAA. Their information, it applies to data of European citizens. Close that. But if those European citizens are being, are in Europe at you're in Europe and you're in Italy, vacationing, and you have a problem and your doctor tries to treat you, that's okay. But if you're a European citizen and your doctor is a U.S. doctor trying to treat a U.S. citizen, that doctor has to adhere to European guidelines. So, they have even heftier fines than we have, and you'll see our fines in a minute. 20 million euros for serious violations. And so, if a U.S.-based healthcare entity interacts with European citizens by storing, and a lot of this you will see is the word storing, and using their sensitive data, that entity is subject to the GDPR, regardless of its location. So if you're storing that information in the Azure cloud about a U.S. citizen, you have to you're under the regulations of GDPR. They do allow some PDI disclosure. I'm sorry, HIPAA allows some disclosure without patient consent. Two healthcare providers may send it to each other for treatment purposes, so the X-ray, so they don't have to do a second X-ray. But in GDPR, you have to have explicit consent from the data patient or subject. So if two hospitals want to share my X-ray, they have to get my consent first. They also have a very interesting thing, which I think we will have eventually, which is the right to be forgotten. If somebody says, I want you to erase my data, you have to erase their data. Forget it, hey, no problem, because I don't have backups, right? to go to somebody's point before, so great, that's easy, but what if you do have backups? You have to go to the backups and get the data out of the backups. So old tapes.
How is that, David? How is that possible?
It's because, well, the good news is that today we don't really do disk to tape, right? If tape, and most healthcare organizations are holding in the backups, they're 2 weeks worth of backups, right? Because the data is current. You have if you look at your medical record on your phone, all your data is there. But if it's been backed up, they're not keeping the backups forever, right? They're aging out the backups much more quickly in today's day and age, with disk to disk to disk. So, how would it's very difficult. But if it's on tape, it's very difficult. If they printed that out on green bar paper, right? The old IBM printer days, You got to go get that and take care of it. You got to go to, what if it's in Iron Mountain, right? If I, you go to your doctor's offices, they still have paper files sitting there, right? How do you get rid of those paper files, especially if you shipped it off to Iron Mountain? It's a big problem. But they have to solve it. And in Europe, individuals have that right. So I don't know, Adam, maybe we got to think about this, figure out a way to do it.
Well, I guess, is it time to ask you a question? We're going to keep going.
Yeah. Well, I'm going to finish up GDPR in a second, so go ahead, yeah.
So my question is about the balance of common sense here.
It's always
So,
good, yeah.
So I'm just thinking that the size of the entity, I think, seems to be really important. In the Massachusetts data safety law, there's a specific reference to it. It says basically, this is scaled to the size of your organization. We don't expect a solo practice to exercise the same kind of care that a large company is going to exercise, or have the same resources.
Right.
I guess my question about all of this stuff is, Martin's a trained, insured computer professional. He's going and he obviously, like any trained professional, he's going to see stuff. It's part of the job. And I'm wondering about the long-term cultural issues here, which is that I'm wondering if we need to develop some more common sense about getting back to the meaning of this, because the meaning of it is to protect people from, I heard the story about Hollywood, people who had access to Hollywood records. They were like in, a Hollywood hospital, and they had George Clooney, they had access to George Clooney's records, right? And gave it out to some newspaper reporter. Now that is disgusting and ought to be prevented, and ought to be prosecuted. But if you compare that to Martin seeing the name of a patient, when he's a trained, discreet professional, it seems like if we spend so much energy or worrying about what's on encrypted backups, if we spend so much energy chasing those mice instead of dealing with the big issues, I think we actually might end up being less secure.
Right, but the question is, if you have Martin, who I trust, right, and you trust, and his clients trust, and you have Jamie, I don't know if Jamie is as trustworthy as Martin. So the bare minimum common sense thing that business associate type people need to do is and I'll show you this in a minute, you need to get certified in the HIPAA training, through HIPAA training, and you have to just have your BAA. That covers you. All the other stuff is really the big guys, right? But I'll tell you, what if the neighborhood kid breached the dentist's office and stole the information, or put stuff up on, Snapchat. I don't even know. So it's a cultural thing. I think what they're trying to do is imbue the sense of urgency in healthcare providers and their business associates to do the right thing and be proactive in thinking about security and privacy. Is somebody going to come in and ask for their data to be deleted? Probably not. As a matter of fact, they probably want it to stay there in case they have to come back and have the doctor, take care of them again. So, again, this is Europe, right? So Europe is crazy. Was the fact that Microsoft had Internet Explorer embedded in Windows that big a deal? I don't think so. But so your point is well taken, Adam, I think, but my point is, and I think my approach to this is, as a professional consultant, what your best practices need to be. What your high level standards that you need to adhere to. What the right thing to do is. You just have to do it. How many of us have backups of our financial information? We know we need to do it. Do we do it? I hope so. So, how do you become GDPR compliant? It's the same thing, pretty much the same as it is for HIPAA. Appointed data protection officer, which in our language would be a CSO, chief security officer, conduct an assessment, implement the ability to identify and report breaches, and I guess this is it, Adam, establish privacy by design. So there are other regulations out there in the world. I'm going to skip over the California one. I've got a couple slides on it, but I'm going to skip over it. You guys can look at the CCPA, the California Consumer Privacy Act. It's very much tied, at the hip to HIPAA, so to speak, good pun. But they're different, but they have carved out sections of the CCPA, and relegated that to HIPAA. But what they're saying is privacy and security should be implemented by design. And, there it is, right? So, and by the way, implemented by design is in our own standard operating procedures, our SOPs. What is that? That's another regulation. Wait, another one. Yep, the CCP. I'm not going to go into it. I will say that because of the CCP, Google had to pay $22.5 million back in 2012 because of activity tracking cookies, and then Facebook because of Analytica. Remember that just last year, $5 billion with a B bucks, right? So, this is what the California Consumer Privacy Act is trying to do. And this is the CCP exceptions regarding HIPAA. So, you can go to the OAG.ca privacy CCPA and look into it more. What can you do to help yourself? Here's one from our friends at Microsoft or Microdollars. I'm going to just really quickly say that Microsoft is a member of the High Trust Alliance. I think of them as an alliance. They've come up with a common security framework that lets healthcare organizations and their providers demonstrate security and compliance in a consistent and streamlined manner. The framework builds on HIPAA and the High Tech Act. Bottom line is, so that cloud service providers like Amazon and Microsoft Azure can measure compliance. So the thing you can do is, if you have a system, a web portal, a database, put it in Azure, because Azure is High Trust certified. So that's a big check mark. My ISP in Iowa, one of their sites is High Trust certified and the other is not. And that's because they answered the questions wrong on the High Trust certification. To become High Trust certified, $10,000, $5,000. I'm not going to pay that money to become, so that I can say to my clients, I'm High Trust certified. But if I put my systems, which includes, Office 365, right? The CRM product, whatever, I forgot what that's called, right? But all that Microsoft stuff, if you're using it out of the Azure cloud, your electronic information in the background, if using SharePoint there, that information is housed in the Azure cloud. You're de facto High Trust certified, or at least you get to blame them. This is out of order a little bit, but before COVID, they let us use Skype and UpDocs and whatever the hell. I don't even know these G Suites. Now, you can use Zoom for the post-COVID allowed telemedicine. And you're right, Adam, and I probably should change this. During COVID allowed telecommunications, because, we'll have to revisit when COVID's over. But something like Google Hangouts, guess what? They're changing because there's new telecommunication regulations. And they're basically, I think Google Hangouts voice is going away, and they're going to build it into something else and Google didn't explain what new regulations there are that it's making them removing the voice support in Hangouts but it's probably has to do with the FCC mandate to have, for voice services to include location with 911 calls. So Adam, this could probably be, all this other technology regulation stuff could probably be 2 or 3 more meetings, right? To keep us abreast of these other regulation areas, you know.
David?
Financial, yeah. Good.
A quick question. Once in a while, when I'm working with a therapist client, I have observed things they're doing that are probably not HIPAA compliant.
Mm-hmm.
Like I remember that I had one therapist client where I was going to suggest to her that we set up a TrueCrypt, now VeraCrypt container, because she had a system to fill out billing forms and submit them to her, insurance companies or whatever.
Mm-hmm.
But these billing forms, which of course include, patient name, address, social, et cetera, were just, basically PDF files lying around in a hard drive.
With password protection, which
Nope.
gives you the encryption.
Nope.
Well,
not at all. Nothing was encrypted.
Right.
I was heading towards trying to set her up with encryption.
Yeah, right. I mean, BitLocker that drive.
Yeah, no, I hear you. We have never done it. She has never consented. I've never gotten her to sit down and do it.
Right.
So, I'm not a person to drop a dime on someone.
No,
but
yell at her. Yell
but
at
should
her.
I?
Go ahead, sorry.
But on the other hand, she's pleasant to work with and she's my client. So, it also seems silly to say, I refuse to work with you until you become HIPAA compliant. So what do you have to say about all that?
Way? You could say, I need 20 minutes to BitLocker your drive. Not that she'll know what that means, but because that's
Martin.
Yeah.
Martin.
Yes.
I ran into the same problem with one of my clients. She was dealing with PII data on contractors, and she was just throwing paperwork, including the social security numbers, the birth dates, in the trash. I said, that's not happening.
right.
I said, you need to get a paper shredder, and if I have to, I will buy it, and I'll put it on the bill.
I've done that.
And ultimately, she assented to it. She didn't like it, but she assented to it, and I made sure that she was using it, because I told her, I says, if you get compromised because of this, you are liable.
Right. Sometimes I think the saying is I think sometimes you have to lead the horse to the water and you have to make them drink. Right?
But I guess my question is do I incur any liability for her inability or unwillingness to do this?
No.
Yeah, because don't let them blame it on you, whatever you do.
If you were, but they'll blame it on you, but you're not culpable. You're not liable.
Yeah, don't let them blame it on you.
Well,
You
David,
have to.
David, if I can ask about this, I wonder about that. So here's the scenario. Do you want to say something, Kimberly?
I would always try to get everything on writing, because if she got mad or something, she could blame it on him.
Yeah.
Well, I'm just wondering about liability, David, in the sense that we as computer professionals are advising people. This, I think, is a huge area of exposure for us that I think we in this group should be thinking about, which is if you're the computer professional, and I think I agree with Kimberly, if you're the computer professional and you don't carefully document, so Martin, I would say, I would put in your billing notes saying, I strongly advise this person to do such and such.
Mm-hmm.
Because if later there's a breach, she gets fined. She would, I think, very much, I used to be married to a lawyer, and she told me people can sue about anything they want. They don't have to be right. And a lawsuit itself is just real trouble. And so if I think we want to think about our exposure, and I think we are exposing ourselves when we're with a customer who's not complying. And I think by very carefully documenting that we told this person that they were not in compliance, we strongly recommended this. You can't make them do it. But
I'll tell you that we, as professional, as consultants and professional people, we should look to our other professional friends, the accountants and the lawyers. What would they do? They would not stand for that. They would
And
say,
it's,
you can't be my client if you're going to do that.
Well,
and
David,
especially if they're,
hold on a second. David, I guess so, but the problem is a cultural one,
Yeah, well,
which is if there isn't a culture, like in lawyers and accountants are a guild, they have these regulations they have to follow or they lose their license.
yeah. I worked
But
for,
hold on, Kimberly, I'm talking, please.
Hmm.
Thank you. But computer people are not a guild where we do not have regulations. There's almost no regulations about us. We don't have official professional standards of any kind. And so I recommend to all of us that we need to protect ourselves even better than lawyers and accountants.
oh yeah, yeah, absolutely.
especially when
you
you're
wanna say
working,
something?
especially when you're working for somebody who's a therapist, especially if they are involved with a company like Elliott Community Services or something like that.
That's why you
Because
need to be.
we have a lot of ethics in like a place like Elliott or Bamsey or High Point,
Right.
you know, because all it takes is one person, just
Yep.
one.
Yep, one person who
Because
got
what
fired.
if somebody else got on that computer?
Yeah. Or the guy
what
who
if one
just got
person?
fired from the job, right?
Yeah, say
got
that's
laid
a good
off.
example.
Or got laid off and is
Or-
pissed that they got laid off.
Yeah,
Okay.
because like, let me finish. I went to High Point, okay? We shared computers, okay? And all it takes is them to say, oh, it was the IT person. Now the IT person don't have proof that they said, oh, I have proof that this on writing. Now it's their word against the IT person.
Right.
Who's gonna go down? Because they have writing that they did this on their contract for the job.
Yeah, yeah. You know, and actually, Adam, in your side of the business, you know, if a you know, you talk about a shredder, Sharice,
Yeah.
you know, if you look at printers and you want to throw away a printer, does that printer have memory in it?
Good question.
Fax machine, does it have memory in it? Did you fax a medical form? And is that stored in that fax's memory? Can you just take that fax machine and chuck it in the garbage bin outside? No.
Right, or if you received a fax, it may be in there too.
Yeah. Right.
Oh, no, I
But
tell people,
obviously responsible, you know, you can only do the one you get your hands on. But we actually, when I was working for the CRO, before, you know, the IT guy said, look, before we chuck a small little Lexmark laser printer in the trash bin out back, he pulled out the memory chips. And, you know, smashed them with a hammer. You know, it's, you know, if there's a drum in there, you know, with a disc, you know, does that have date on it? You bet it does. So let me go quickly here. I'll do now I'm going to go lightning fast. So what does this mean for you if you want to venture into this space? So, you know, what, me worry? You know, remember him? You know, the maximum penalty for a HIPAA violation, 1.5 million bucks. None of us are going to get hit with that because, you know, there's no way. But you could have anywhere from $100 to $50,000 per violation. You could, if the reasonable cause leads to violation, it could be 1,000 to 50 for each violation. This is how it's going up. If it's willful neglect that's been corrected within 30 days of discovery, you know, it might only be up to 10,000, you know, to 50,000. For willful neglect, you know, that's where the 50,000 to 1.5 million can come up. And again, this is hospitals and, you know, but if it goes, you know, if there are multiple HIPAA violations, it could go to 1.5 million. I'll give you a very quick story. My friend has a daughter who is in the neonatal unit, and they had a Facebook page, and they posted pictures of themselves with their favorite babies who they loved and were taken care of, and, you know, getting them out of that, you know, the premature neonatal unit and getting them, you know, healthy so they can go home, and they posted pictures. Boom. They were in violation, and they got hit with a hefty fine.
Was there personally
And
identified?
some people lost their jobs. 2 of the nurses lost their jobs.
Oh, okay.
But could those babies be identified from those photographs?
Some people can.
I don't know. So what me worry? You betcha. Right. So, again, to wrap this part up, and I'm going to try to do a very quick demo in a minute. Why it applies to IT consulting? If you cover an entity, which is an IT shop in healthcare scenario, if you're covered by a business associate agreement, if you may be covered by like a business associate agreement, if your clients expect it or don't expect it, I think we come to the conclusion that even if they don't expect it, you need to be thinking about it, and you're doing it to protect your business and your professional standards. Here's what you should do as a consultant. Complete.
And somebody's playing the guitar.
Everybody okay?
Yeah, I was about to say, someone's playing guitar.
Yeah, I was playing it during the break, but very badly. Complete a certificate training, get a test and get a certificate. Protect your client's PHI, maintain BAA agreements as needed, stay current with the regulations, and use secure platforms like Azure. Here's what you could do for that first one. You have to complete training and take a test. These are the guys, where did I go? These are the guys I went to, HIPAAexams.com. I do this every year or two. And they're great, and they're certified, and New York State Health Department approved provider, which should be good enough for Massachusetts. So HIPAAexams.com, I would say do it. Put your systems, put your business stuff in Azure Cloud. Those are the 2 first things you can do. So let's talk about my case study. So I'm going to do this very quickly. Adam, do I have a few more minutes? Or
Yeah, go. Yeah.
Okay, go. So texting, right? The vendors, right? So in a texting environment, right? I've got texting on my phone. Apple provides me the texting. Verizon provides me the texting. Well, what do I do if I'm going to build a solution for a client that's going to be HIPAA secure, HIPAA compliant, and not rely on those guys and their technology? So there's 2 vendors out there that I looked at. And this is a case study, right? So I looked at Twilio. Why did I look at these guys versus building it? This is a buy versus build decision. Am I going to build an SMS system? It's a no-brainer. I'm not going to build the SMS. I'm not going to build the pipe. No way. I don't even know how to build it. But I can buy a solution that rides on the SMS pipe, and that's what these guys provide. Twilio and SignalWire provide APIs that let me send secure texts, and that's what I thought, right? So I got to pick between these 2 guys to build my app, so that from my little Windows application or on my phone with my own little web app, when I click, hey, let's meet, we got a meeting next week, that's going out securely and landing on that other phone securely. So they both provide the SMS transmission APIs, the application program interface that lets me ride on top of that, right? So it's my ticket to get on the bus to get to where I need to go. So Twilio, when data is in motion, it's encrypted. That's got good old HTTPS, right? It's encrypted, it's secure, 256-bit encryption. It'll go up as it goes up in time. They have data at rest, which means that the data is stored in a database somewhere, but it's encrypted. So I give a big thumbs up to that, right? Great. If it's stored, it's encrypted. Twilio, though, I need to have a BAA with them. Why? Because they could store, if I sent over their encrypted pipe and their secure pipe, and if I sent PHI, which is okay, it gets stored on their server. I didn't know that in the beginning when I first started using them. So therefore, they told me, and I found this out, 2-3 weeks ago when I was talking to Adam about doing this, they actually told me they require a BAA with me for me to use their services for secure PHI. I said, all right, great, fine. I got a BAA, no problem. I'll sign yours. Yeah, for $2,000 a month, they're going to charge me $2,000 a month, and it's actually $7,500 a month if I want their enterprise version. $2,000 a month to have a contract with them. The software doesn't change, the technology doesn't change, none of that changes. The only thing that changes is that we now have a contract, which then they charge me $2,000 a month to give me that contract. Holy mackerel. So that made me go out and start searching for some other solutions. So SignalWire, they too have data in motion, but they only have data in motion. They don't store the data. I don't know why Twilio stores the data, but they do. I mean, it sounds good. I mean, actually, if I go to their website and I want to look at my metrics and stuff, they probably need to have it in the database to some extent. But I don't want them storing the PHI in there. But if I send a text with PHI in it and they store it in their database, even if it's encrypted, I need a BAA. These guys say that they don't store any data. Therefore, this is right out of the DHS website. SignalWire is considered a conduit under HIPAA, right? It's just the pipe, and therefore there's no need to sign a BAA. Well, so here's the conduit exception very quickly, right? It says entities that act as mere conduits for the transport of information, but do not access the information other than on a random or infrequent basis, are not business associates. So, wow. I wrote the code. What do I do now? I can't give them $2,000. I've got a dilemma. I like Twilio. Actually, I love Twilio. I think they're a great product. I'd like to continue using them, but $2,000 a month, no way. I like SignalWire, and I don't have to spend $2,000 with them, but they're very new. I mean, they're kind of like a 15-year-old company, but they did other things. SignalWire, that version of that software is fairly new to them. And I don't really know who their SMS customers are. They both have big customers. They have Lyft and Uber and Netflix. I mean, big customers using them, but, I would have to pay, my corporate counsel lawyer to verify whether or not SignalWire is, really, can I use them? Even though they say they're conduit. So
But
now
David,
I don't know what to do. Yeah.
But David, if SignalWire signs a BAA with you, I mean, apart from having a breach, which is embarrassing, aren't you at least covered legally because they swore to you that they had good stuff, and if they didn't, it's not on you?
SignalWire or Twilio?
SignalWire.
Yeah, but they don't do BAAs.
Oh, sorry, you didn't say that. I apologize.
Yeah, just they don't. Yeah, I'm sorry. I was.
Oh, because they're a conduit.
Because they're a conduit, right?
Oh.
There's an exception to the BAA for companies that transport, called the conduit exception. And
so your conundrum is, are they a secure conduit?
Yeah, and it's like the old thing. Do I really want to go on and start using them in the first year of their software? What if they want to? How many times have I bought software? That 2 years later was the company went belly up. And I'm stuck. So.
There's something I don't understand, and maybe other people are puzzled too. I'm not clear. A BAA is held by if you do business with this texting company on behalf of your client. What is the BAA protecting? Is it protecting the texting company, or is it protecting you?
From their perspective, it's really protecting them, but it's also protecting me because I'm the software provider who's writing the code that's letting the data so transfer through and sit in their system. So my hospital customer has a BAA with me. I have a BAA with Twilio.
You're letting
right?
Twilio. You're basically letting Twilio into your loop. You're basically saying,
yes.
The BAA is Twilio or Twilio saying, yes, we are HIPAA compliant. But they refuse to do that unless you give them extra money.
Yeah, $24,000 a year.
Yeah.
Yeah. Exactly.
I've heard of
And
this.
I was, by
other-
the way, I'm flabbergasted. I'm flabbergasted. And by the way,
I've heard this
their
with
enterprise
other-
version, which again, I don't, go ahead.
Well, I've heard of this with other vendors who will refuse to do a BAA or will only do them under special circumstances. I think Skype is one of them. And there are other vendors who will only do a BAA under special circumstances.
Well, I'm sure that that Zoom scenario that we talked about earlier, where, you know, those Baku bucks, right? There's probably a BA involved in there, right?
Okay.
Yep. If, you know, Zoom for, you know, that other scenario. So, you know, so here's my solution. So my solution is to use Twilio, but don't transmit any PHI or PII through them that they would store, and avoid the need for the BAA. So what I did was, here's how I did it. And I'm going to talk about it for 1 minute and then I'm going to show it to you. So for my system, if a doctor wants to send a text to the patient saying, I have a message for you that I'd like you to read, what I do is I say, I go back to and I stole this from AOL, right? I basically tell the user through the texting conduit into their text, their iPhone text, or their, you know, that you've got mail. I take that approach. I don't tell them what the mail is. I don't even put a wrapper around it. I basically just say, you've got mail, you've got a text. Click this link to leave your phone, go to a secure web browser, through a secure web browser, to a secure portal, put your PIN in or your password, and then you can read the text there.
Well, then why not
That's
just,
how I did it.
then why not just use straight SMS? If, you know, if you're going to send a thing that doesn't have to be secured.
Yes, but this solution, Twilio, has a lot of other features in there. So in the API. So for instance, if they're sending 500 emails out, 500 texts out for reminding people that they have sessions the next day, you know, here's my 2-hour reminder or my 24-hour reminder. They have lookup capabilities in their API that says, let me check that phone. And I'm going to show you right now, I'm going to show you a little bit of this. Let me jump right into that so you can see. So here's my database. Okay, this is demo. This is my SQL Server encrypted database in that subtropolis line encrusted place. If you have a phone number that's a bad phone number, I don't want to every single time I send a text to it, try to send it again. I have a lookup API from Twilio that says, let me look up the number first. If it's good, then I'll send the text. If it's bad, I'll mark that number as bad, and I won't ever send a text again, because every time I send it, even if it's a bad number, it costs me 0.002 cents per send.
David, I'm just going to interrupt for a quick sec.
Yep.
For people who want to see this more clearly, your Zoom session has a view options tab at the top. If you click on that view options tab, you can change the Zoom ratio. If you change it to 200%, you'll be able to see David's interface a lot more clearly.
Yes. Tell them that. You want to tell them again? That's fine. Yep.
And you can scroll around just to get a feel for it.
Yep.
Oh, so David, in other words, what you did was you said, I'm going to switch my use of texting to be, presume it's unsecure and public, and just send a, hey, you've got mail. And that's all you said.
Exactly. Exactly. I'm going to see that in a second.
Okay, great.
It's a little more, right? I mean, I said, it's the old bait and switch, right? You know,
It's referring someone over to a secure channel.
exactly. That's my workaround. But I love the tool because it lets me look them up once. If it's bad, I never have to send it again. The provider, the healthcare provider, will get they get a report. They can look at phone numbers. They can say, oh, you know, here's my list of that we sent out last night. Here are bad phone numbers. Let's go correct these phone numbers so we can send them out. The next time we send a text, it'll go out correctly, and it will self-heal. Right, and then like over here, so I'll even put in the error message that says that the number 178.1.201.901. Well, there was a typo. Somebody put in the letter Y. instead of 9010, it's not a valid phone number. So, right. So they have a lot of power in their system. And so I'm able to take advantage of all that. Well, you know, sending the SMS, they have loopbacks so that when there's not just the lookup that says look this number up against this database of numbers. They'll all say, is it a voice over IP phone? Is it a landline? So there's a tremendous amount of capability in there. So from a demo standpoint, you know, I prep this demo to say, oh, you know, here's a bunch of emails that I sent out, and we'll see those texts or emails that the scheduling agent will be calling you soon because we loaded your data. You know, here's numbers you can call to verify that this is all good. So I'm going to take one of these records, which is not done. I stamped it as TBD, to be done. And now I'm going to go and I'm going to run the code that runs unattended, you know, every 5 minutes, you know, it could be every minute, every 5 minutes, however long we want to tax the system. And I'm going to bring up my code because everybody likes to see code in a demo. So here's my code. I'm going to, I'm going to go one line here. Twilio.secure. And I use my account. I go in there, I hit it. And I'm going to send depending on whether or not they're an employee of the hospital or they're commercial, I'm going to send this stuff out via text. And here's my Twilio message resource. And if it comes back successful, I'm going to update the text in the database and say done. If it's not, I'm going to say it was bad. So I'm going to go and run this code. And I actually want to show you, I think it's here. Yep. I brought up my Verizon phone number in the system so that we could actually see that text come in. Interestingly, there's a lot of topics going on. There was a competitor tonight at 7:30 that was doing hacking health, securing medical IoT, right? Same thing we just talked about. I wanted to go to that one too. So we're going to see a new message come in here. So I'm going to go and I'm going to run this code. And it's running, and it's running, and it's running, and then it should be done. And let me look at the database, see if it's done. Oh, we have a time limit. We don't want to send text to people outside of normal, you know, hours. We don't want their phones ringing on the side of their desk. So we basically have a timing thing here. I thought it'd be done by 20. Let's make that 23. So if it's less than 11 o'clock, we can send text. I know there's nothing in there. So I'm building that. I'm sending it. It's looping through. It's going to find. You'll see a console window will pop up. And it popped up on my other screen, and bing, you all heard the bing, right? So that means that this TBD should be done now, if my demo worked. Yep, it's done. And if we come over to my Verizon text, I now have a second message in my text queue from the phone number associated with the texting. And scheduling, and this is what the text says, right? The scheduling agent, you know, you've got mail. And working with the client who then vetted this with their legal counsel at the hospital, they said, you know, this is okay to say because there's no PHI in here. There's actually no PII in here, right? Except for their number over here, which is their, you know, their own phone number up here. That's my cell phone number. But hey, you know, if you have any questions, call their phone number, right? If you want to opt out, you have to have an opt out. You know, it's the law to have opt outs. You can click this link and then click a link. But when you click this, and I bogus this up so we wouldn't show their real thing. But when you click that, it basically takes you to this website, which gives them, hey, you've taken the first, you know, so this, as you said, Martin, you expressed it better than I did. I channeled them to the secure channel, right? Which is HTTPS, encrypted, 256, right? You know, it's all 256 SHA. It's great, right? So I avoided the whole issue.
And David,
Yes.
the doctor or the person who's using this texting system is not permitted to type something, right? Like
Correct. Well,
this is
right,
set up
so-
to prevent them from making this mistake.
Right. So in the AOL, you've got mail or you've got a personal interrogatory, text from the doctor. This will not say, this. It will say, hey, you've got mail. Click here to view it, and it will take them to the portal where they then have to sign in.
But nobody can send a text through this.
Nobody. Nobody can send a text, as you
The
said.
wording is set up by the lawyers in advance.
Exactly, and it's I've said to them, look, let's have 10 standard use cases, scenarios that we need to adhere to, and that leads to the secure stuff on the back end. I could show you my chart from Epic, that says you've got mail, right? And then I click it, and then I go into it, right? And I'm viewing it in that secure container.
Yeah, it's just like when my doctor has something for me, whether it's a lab result, whether it's just chatting back and forth about, maybe I might need this or that medication, or whether it's here's your appointment reminder, flu shot stuff. All I get is an email that says there's a thing waiting for you on the portal.
Exactly.
Yeah. Well, it's 8:45.
Yep.
So we should wrap up. Do you want to do a wrap up, David?
So that wasn't too bad. I 15 minutes over time is fantastic for me. So I hope that, you guys got a lot out of this. I got a lot back from you all. So I enjoyed doing this. This is my first presentation.